everybody. Welcome back to Chase the Unknown. We had so much fun with Emily the last time that she was here. We just had to bring her back for a second episode. Welcome, Emily. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me back.
I'm going to go ahead and thank you a third time for your time, for being here.
Yeah.
And coming back.
Yeah. Y'all are a lot of fun.
You mentioned a little bit about how your voice changed later in life as opposed to normally people's voices changes, and during puberty and all that. But you're mentioning that your voice changed later in life and how did that affect your singing?
Yeah. It was really interesting the way it happened to me because most of the time, even when you're in like puberty and your voice is changing, which my voice probably did, but women's voices don't stop maturing until they're about 26. I just never expected that later in life it would do something so drastic as this. But it happened really in a strange way for me. I was sick over Christmas, right after Christmas, over New Year's, and I ended up losing my voice. And I had a recording coming up the end of January, and I was kind of panicking about what was going on. And so my vocal coach put me on vocal rest for about 4 days. And during that time, I did absolutely no talking, no making any noises, just to get my voice to kind of heal and get ready for my recording. And when I came out of vocal rest and started just easing myself into using my voice again, it was different. And I didn't understand what was going on. I thought it was maybe left over from being sick. And I went back to my voice coach, and we were doing warm-ups and things. And I was explaining to him what was going on. And I said, I feel like I can sing. I feel like my voice is working again, but there's just certain notes that I can't hit. I can't hit them the same way. I said, I don't know what is going on. And so he's sitting there and we're warming up and stuff. And I could tell that he had something on his mind. And because I know him pretty well. And so we were getting into the lesson. And at one point he goes, it's almost like you're a mezzo soprano now. And he had said this before as a joke. So I thought he was joking again. That day, and we continued. He goes, no, I'm serious. He said, I think your voice has just gone through a very late in life vocal change. And so all this happened about 3 weeks before my recording date. And thank God it happened so quickly that I didn't really have a time to really think about it. So I was just acting on instincts coming out of that being sick and then finding out my voice changed. So it worked out pretty well for my recording. And after that, it took a bit of time to get used to, because after the newness of it wears off and everything, I just kind of started reverting back to muscle memory and habit. And so it's definitely taken something to get used to the technique and also the sound of it. It threw off my pitch for a while because everything in my voice feels the same, except my voice dropped about 3 half steps.
And you mentioned having to relearn things.
Yeah. Certain techniques, the technique itself had to change a little bit, and even some techniques that were still the same from being a soprano to being a mezzo soprano. It was just learning where to do it now, because you have to do it in different areas of your voice.
Question, actually. Which do you like your voice better before or after?
Well, that's kind of a trick question, because the way I look at things, a lot of people were very concerned, especially my voice instructor was very concerned that I was going to try and make my voice something that it couldn't be anymore. He was afraid that I was going to want to still be a soprano and sing soprano songs. And I was perfectly fine with my voice changing. And the reason being is because I look at things not so much from what I want, but what I can do. My voice is naturally now a mezzo soprano. So there's no sense in me even trying to be something that it can't be, or wanting it to be something that it can't be, if that's never going to happen. As a soprano, I was very happy as a soprano. As a mezzo soprano, I'm still very happy.
And I think there's an important life lesson in that, honestly, in what you just said. That can apply to pretty much anything.
Yeah. It's definitely different because there's certain things that I can and can't do now. It's really been a blessing to me because as a mezzo soprano, my range has actually grown. as opposed to when I was a soprano. And it's more just because my voice has finally settled and balanced itself. As before, as a soprano, I didn't have as big of a range because it wasn't balanced correctly. And so it always gave me a bit of struggle. It's still giving me a struggle now because it's only been like 4 months since the voice change and I'm having to relearn all of this.
Wow.
But I'm a very impatient person. So I'm like, 4 months is enough. Let's get on with this and
let's
actually
get going.
things.
Like level out, come on.
Right.
Keep going.
Mm.
Well, what was it like dealing with that pressure of going from such a huge thing of, okay, my voice has just changed. I suddenly have to figure out what I can and what I can't do. So I can deliver in the studio. I can make my my quality the absolutely best that can be.
Yeah. Well, I was really, really blessed to have people that I was working with on this. But you're right. This was a big deal. This was actually my first time in the recording studio myself, but it was a huge deal. We had 8 musicians. I had a conductor. We had, everything set up but I had a great contractor that I was working with that was in touch with all the musicians for me. And I had my vocal coach was going to be there that day. Like everything was set and we'd gone over the music I also had 4 other singers coming in that day. But this was my project. I was the producer. I wrote all the songs and I was also singing them. So talk about a lot of stress. But leading up to that, in terms of working through that with my voice change, it was just a lot of prep beforehand with my vocal coach, going over the song, saying like, okay, we had to spend all that time instead of focusing on my new voice in itself and kind of discovering that. We just had to go like, okay, for this song, you have to sing it this way now and make sure that you're singing these notes this way with your new voice, and making sure that I could still do those things. Thank goodness. My vocal coach says I always had this instinct that I was going to end up a mezzo-soprano because I wrote my songs to be sung by mezzo-sopranos. So that was a really great thing that I ended up being able to still sing all of them in their original keys and everything for that day. But it was really, I tried to not think about it during those weeks leading up to the recording process because I knew that was going to stress me out. And even the day of the recording, I'm like, just don't think about it. Just like, everything is already set up. You just go in and you do it. And on the way home, because we were at the studio for about 12 hours and we had a 3-hour drive back each way. So it had been about a 18-hour day. And we were driving back home after recording. And I remember sitting in the car going, that was stressful. And that was the first time I had said that in a couple of weeks, because it was just like the buildup of everything. I wasn't thinking about it. And then afterwards, when I could finally just like be like, take a breath, that was very stressful, but I made it through it. But it was because of, God was so good in being with me through all of that and providing those people to be alongside me. My support with my mom and my sister were there that day helping me, and my voice coach sat in the room the whole time and, just like saying like, you can do this, relax, just don't forget that this is what you need to do. So I will say that sometimes somebody is not better than anybody to be your support system. You really need to know who is behind you and know that they are behind you before you include them in that. And I don't mean to sound cynical in that, but I just know, like, for me, like, there's only a handful of people that are that close to me that I could really, really rely on for their support and their advice and things. One of them being my mom. Like, she is my biggest supporter, but she's also my biggest critic. She will tell me if she's like, I don't think that sounds good. I don't think you should wear that. I don't think that, you should do that. But she also respects me in the sense of like, that day, that was my thing. And if I wanted her advice, I knew that I could count on her for it, but she was more so in the background that day because that's where she needed to be. And that's where I needed her to be that support for me.
You mentioned that not everybody is, I don't want to say qualified, but it's just simply that not everybody, you have to find those right people that are right for your circle.
And that is something that I struggle with so hard because I very much want all of my friends to be my best friends. And I have to realize that like not everybody thinks that way. And so it's something that I struggle with. And it's happened to me a lot where I end up pulling somebody too close. And I was like, that wasn't the time they weren't the right person to be included in, like you were saying, in that circle. So that's a really good way to think about it, though.
Yeah, definitely. And you also mentioned that you also mentioned in terms of like when you're recording, like, you know, you're like, this, I was the producer. This was my thing. Had that been a big dream of yours leading up to that moment?
You know, it was really strange because I thought that I would have a feeling in the recording studio, like what you're describing, and I didn't. And I'll kind of lead up to why I didn't, and I don't think I did, even though it was something that I had been definitely praying about. I started writing only about 2.5 years ago, and it had to do with AMTC, actually. It was there that I did a collaboration showcase, and I had written what I call nonsense songs before, and they're just like nothing. And I never thought that I would actually do anything with them. I never thought I would become a songwriter, and especially like things kept changing. You know, I was thinking about going into musical theater, and then I decided to do opera, and then it was like, oh, now I'm going to write songs. And it was something that I definitely feel God called me to do, though, because I was just kind of like thrown into this collaboration at Shine with AMTC, and I learned so much there about songwriting. And I know that if I hadn't have done that, then I would not have felt comfortable in writing my own songs like the following 6 months later. But I started writing, and whenever I started writing, it was a very surreal experience for me, because I would write and I would sit down, and about 10 minutes later, I would have all the lyrics, I would have the melody, and I would have an idea of how I wanted to arrange the song. Being a musician, I arranged my own songs as well. So all the 8 instruments that played on that recording day, I arranged all their parts wrote all their music. And that was something that took a lot longer to do. But the song itself, it would just come out of me. And so over a couple of months, I wrote 2 songs, and I was like, I think I'd really like to get these recorded. And I started thinking about recording them as singles, and we started looking into it, and it just didn't really work out. And I was like, okay, I wrote another song, and I'm like, maybe that was why we didn't record those 2. I had another song I wanted to do. Now we can record 3 songs. And so over the next 2 years, I ended up writing, I think it was 12 songs. And the whole time it was like, okay, maybe now's the time to write, to record. And I would have like, okay, I have 6 songs. I can record an EP. Maybe now is the time God wants me to record. And it wouldn't work out. So I would write some more songs. And one day in December, we were finally at that place where I had almost 2 albums of music written and ready to be recorded. And we were like, everything just started falling into place for us to record. And so early December, we started getting things nailed down. The date fell into place. The studio actually ended up falling through like a month before. No, yeah, it was like 2 weeks before the recording date. We had a falling out with the studio we were supposed to record at. But the other studio we got was for the same exact day. It was a miracle. But everything started falling into place. And I still had this urge inside me in December to write more songs, and it wasn't happening. And I was starting to get frustrated, thinking like, what is happening to me? I can't write songs anymore. And I heard God telling me, that's not this phase. You have written your songs. I have given you this inspiration to write songs. You've written 12 original songs, and now is the time for you to record. You don't need to be writing more songs. You need to be focusing on recording. And that was a huge thing. I almost like broke down in tears, because I was like, God took away that part of my life that I had been living in for 2 years of writing songs. And now I was supposed to be moving into something else. And so moving into that recording date, that was something I had been dreaming about for 2 years and praying about. And I felt like this was the time. So walking into the recording studio, I really expected to have that feeling of like, this is my moment. This is what I've been working so hard for. And I didn't really have that, but not in a bad way, because it definitely lived up to my expectations of what I would thought it would be. But at the end of the day, that is what I do. While music is definitely who I am, I spend probably like 80-90% of every single day in music in some way. Like it's whether I'm listening to it, writing it, playing it, whatever. So music is definitely who I am, but being in the recording studio is more as an extension of what I do. And I know that that's not going to be the last time I'm in the recording studio. It was definitely, and this is where I had so much peace about not having that feeling, was that I felt like it was in the place where I was supposed to be and doing what I was supposed to do. But then again, it's just another day in the office, so to speak. And it's nice that your day in the office can be something, doing something that you love to do and in a place that you feel comfortable at. But I really didn't have that like, this is the thing that I've been dreaming about. Mm-hmm. I actually had that moment yesterday. I got my first song back that I'm going to be releasing back from my master engineer. And it sounded so good. And I just sat there and I was like laughing and crying at the same time. And but it's that finished product when you can finally say like, wow, like I did that.
Exactly. I'm right there with you. Definitely. I know, me personally, I've been able to have some incredible opportunities, kind of in the vein that I know we've talked about previously a little bit about, just in terms of film and stuff, to work on some pretty big projects and be in some pretty high profile situations. And it's really interesting that you say that you say, that, you never had that moment of like, wow, I made it, or wow, this is the culmination of what I've been working for, because in a way you're just in the moment, like it's just another day in the office. Just hearing you talk about music and your songwriting a little bit, I feel like that's kind of right where your passion is. I can in a way feel your passion, just the way you speak about it and just the way that you talk about it with such love and affection that, like you said, you spend 70 to 80% of every day working on that, to work on it and make it better.
Oh yeah, it definitely has its frustrating moments. Don't get me wrong.
But it's one of those things I feel like with passion, in terms of I know someone asked me in the past of like, oh well, how do I know what I'm passionate about? And I feel like I kind of described it in a way of it's the one thing you can never walk away from.
Yeah.
Because you can't explain it. It just has to be in your life.
Oh, well,
sure. It's a headache. It's annoying. You may get so mad at it at times, and sometimes you may just have to walk away for a few days, but you'll always come back because there's that passion inside of you that pushes you always to always do more.
Absolutely.
It's honestly what you do in spite of obstacles or success.
Yeah.
That you'll keep doing it because you want to do it, not because somebody else likes it.
Exactly. And that's one of the things, is that I think so many people get caught up in, no matter what industry you are in, but you see it happen so much in the entertainment industry, is that people get caught up in, if I just make a name for myself, if I just, become known for this or whatever. And especially when it's a true passion that you have, all of that is well and good, as long as it is secondary to your initial passion and desire for it. And that's definitely where my music comes from, and why I'm in the side of the industry that I'm in music, is because I could not stop doing it if I tried. I could not walk away from it, like you said. And it truly, at the end of the day, is the music that I make stems from me loving the craft so much and not wanting affirmation from what other people think or getting success from it. It's just for the love of the art itself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you talk a little bit about your songwriting process? I know you initially mentioned that, you'd never really written before, and you just kind of sat down and just kind of flowed out of you, and I know I've had that experience a few times with a few different things in the past, where it's something you've never really considered before, but you're just like, oh, maybe I should give this a shot. And you just sit down and just happens, Have you noticed over the last few months that you have kind of started going down that writing journey? Has your process changed a little bit? How long would you say it typically takes you to write a song per se?
It definitely varies from song to song, because songs are individuals in a sense of the word. So my process varies from song to song. The time spent varies from song to song. But it was, I have written 12 songs to be recorded. Just to clarify something here, I have written so many songs that are awful, but some of them are only half written, and I just like abandoned them, and maybe I'll go back to them someday. I don't know. Sometimes I save them to use for poems, but the process varies from song to song so much that I don't really have a process. Sometimes I will come up with the lyrics first and I'll write down all the lyrics. And other times I will come up with a melody and do a song like that. That happens very rarely for me. Most of the time it's either the lyrics first and the melody afterwards, or I come up with the lyrics and the melody simultaneously. Sometimes I'll write them down and then I'll come up with a melody for them. Sometimes I will sing and come up with the lyrics as I sing. And so in that way, I'm coming up with the lyrics and melody at the same time, but it really, really changes. As far as the time it takes, I'm a very obsessive person, and I cannot sleep. It's actually really, really bad. I cannot sleep when I'm writing a new song. And so I forget to eat. I don't sleep. I live like a hermit in my room for a couple of days writing, just because it's in my head and I have to figure out how to get it down on paper. And until I figure out how to do that, I cannot have any distractions. And it's not that I can't, it's just that even if I were to try to talk to somebody else, all I would be thinking about would be this song, and I have to get it down. And, so the song itself normally comes out very quickly, but then arranging it, and I have the sound, like all the instruments, and I have to find that sound, because in my head, it's not broken down like, okay, I am definitely hearing a violin and a flute. Like, it's a sound, and then I have to try and figure out what that sound is. And that's what normally takes a little bit longer, but I can normally have a rough arrangement of the song in a couple of days, and then I'll spend anywhere between 2 weeks and a year going back and tweaking it, because the longer it's in my hands, the more I'm going to mess with it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. It's that concept of being in the zone, once you're in the zone, you don't want to leave,
Yeah.
And even the basic instincts of eating and sleeping are come second to the zone, when you're.
Oh yeah. Well, and I cannot shut my mind off. I'll be laying in bed and I'll be like, I need to change that. I need to do this. I need to say that. I need it to sound like this. And I just will not fall asleep.
It's funny. Do you find yourself like laying in bed and then thinking of something and just like, oh, come on. And then jumping up and having to grab your paper or something and redoing, because
yes. I'm currently writing an opera, and it is every single night. I don't know why I get so inspired at night when I'm getting ready for bed. So unfortunately that carries over to me laying in bed trying to go to sleep. So I don't know why I decided to take on something as big as writing an opera when I get so frustrated just trying to write a song and not sleeping, because it's going to take me forever to write this. That means no sleep until it's finished. But yeah, definitely. It happens almost every night that I'm trying to sleep, and I'll be like, oh, that's an idea. I need to write that down. Sometimes I don't, and I forget, and I'm really mad at myself because I just did not feel like rolling over and picking up my phone and writing it down. But I should have.
That's incredible. And like you said, it gives you an opportunity to take some of those songs that may be only half written or partially written, or songs that you did completely write and just didn't make it onto that final track list.
Right.
So I've heard so many stories about single artists or bands or whatever they may be, writing 100 songs, and they take it to their label or their group or whoever it may be. And at the end of the day, only 10 or 12 of them actually make the album.
Yeah.
And so I've always really wondered what happens to all the rest of those songs that they wrote,
Yeah. I'm not going to pretend that this is an original thought, but it is something that has played such an important part in my own writing and creativity, is that no idea is a bad idea. So no matter how absurd it seems in your mind, say it, write it down, tell somebody else, because that one bad idea could lead to an amazing idea, albeit it could take a million other ideas in between. But if that is the spark and that is the origination of that idea, then you have that, if you wouldn't have had that if you hadn't have said that. And sometimes you also need to get those bad ideas like out of your system, and it'll help you to stop thinking about it. Cause there's that bit of like, especially in like curious minds of what if, like, oh, what if I had written that? What if I had written something on that? Like, would it have turned out good? Would it have turned out bad? So until you see that, oh, you know what, that idea didn't work, this idea did, then you just really need to get it all out and then sift through and see what's good and not.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely sift the good out with the bad,
Yeah.
Would you say you would have any other writing tips like that you could give other people that are potentially wanting to start writing, or they are writing and they just feel like they're creatively and just kind of creative, just like in a corner, they're whatever you want to call it, writer's block, whatever you want to call it. Is there any other practical tips you think you would, just from your experience so far, you could give?
Yeah, I don't know if this would help somebody, but something that I have found, and I've heard a lot of people say things about in my own lifetime when it comes to creativity and specifically writing, no matter what you're writing, whether it's a song, a TV show, a movie, whatever. But a lot of people say like, oh, I have to wait to be inspired. I have to wait for this inspiration to come to me and then I can write. And I firmly believe that inspiration is the foundation, but how that inspiration comes, I have a bit of beef with, because so many people sit and they wait for inspiration to come to them. And I always say, inspiration doesn't come and smack you upside the head. Sometimes you have to go out looking for it, and you have to be open for it. That means taking the time to take a walk outside and just don't think, just allow yourself to be and feel and see certain things in the world. Maybe that's, I got an inspiration for a song as I was scrolling on Facebook and I saw a picture. It was the most random inspiration ever. But I was open at that point in my life to ideas and allowing my mind to just trail off into oblivion of where this idea could take me. So don't just sit and wait for inspiration to come to you. Go out and look for it. Be open for inspiration. You can find inspiration in 1,000,001 things right within the 10 feet around you, if you're at least open to exploring beyond the physical and looking into the emotional and the whys and asking questions about things that allow that inspiration to come.
Exactly. And I think that's another huge one that you just mentioned, especially with what the journey I've kind of been on in the past year or so in terms of narrative writing, is that's a huge one, is ask yourself questions, ask yourself, okay, why this? Just ask yourself a bunch of whys, and like you said, inspiration can come from anywhere. You can come from that single post on Facebook. It can come from somebody walking down the street past your house,
And certainly a lot of my songs have been written that way, but I also will, because I know that this has happened to me. And this is where I say, like, there is no one process. Like, I do not even have a set process from song to song. My process changes. So I don't want anybody to feel like, oh, well, this is the process to write a song, or I need to find a specific process. Let your process be whatever it is. However a song wants to come out, let it come out. Don't hold it to, no, I can't write you because you're not following my process. But so many times for me too, songs have just come out. And then after I write it, I'm like, oh, I think it means this. And that sounds really, really strange and like a backwards way of doing things. But sometimes you can express yourself without realizing that you're expressing what you're expressing, if that makes sense. And so allowing yourself to a friend of mine writes screenplays, and he explained it as an auxiliary brain. We both are very similar when it comes to our writing styles. And he explained it as an auxiliary brain. And I said, that is a genius description of it, because it really is removing yourself from it and viewing it as a third person. And you just kind of let your brain go on autopilot and allow it to express. If you're good with words and you can write, I think that this will work. And you just allow the words to come out in a natural form. It'll make the song sound more natural and less forced because it's just flowed out. But it's really funny at the same time, because when you're done writing it, you can look back at it and say, I was expressing this part of something that I was feeling without realizing that that's what I was saying.
Exactly. I think that's a huge that's something that when it just comes to writing in general, it's not necessarily specific to whether it's writing a song or writing a screenplay or whatever that is. Don't overthink it. Allow yourself to go there. Allow yourself to just think again, what if,
As an actor, I know you're more of a music person. But I just want to know, do you have any on-set experience? I think you were in a Disney commercial.
I was in a couple. One of them was for some British thing that was going to be going on, UK TV show. And then another one was for an actual Disney commercial or Disney spot. It was very short. It was something called like The Power of Magic or something. You can look it up on YouTube. It's on Disney's YouTube channel, but that was a very interesting day on set. Well, night, I should say. I got to set, my call time was like 9 or 10 at night, and it was a 12-hour shoot. So I ended up shooting all night and left at about 9 or 10 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really, really surreal to see the park like completely closed. And it was really cool because they never turn off the lights on the castle, which I don't know why I ever thought that they would or wouldn't. But when I got there, it was like, oh, the lights are still on the castle. But people had like hoses and power washers, and they were washing down the buildings from top to bottom and the streets and the sidewalks and just everything. And I remember at one point we were filming and we were going from one side of the park to the other, and we stopped because they had to get that part of the park ready. And so all of us extras, they took to Pinocchio's restaurant there at Walt Disney World. And it was at like 3:00 in the morning, and we were all very tired. So they let us just like go and lay down on a table or some chairs or a bench or something, anywhere that you wanted to, and get some sleep. So every time I went back to Disney after that, it was like past that part, it was like, oh yeah, I slept there at like 3:00 in the morning.
There's my bench.
That sounds like a special memory though.
Yeah, it's a very strange one, and somebody would probably look at you like, what? Like, that's not significant, but it's just kind of cool. Yeah.
And they make sure that, like, I guess, and you said it, I think it's really neat. They don't turn the castle lights off like at all.
No.
So even as a ghost town, there's still that little hint of atmosphere of the magic is still here. It's just kind of hiding a bit. We're chilling while things clean, but it's still here. It never leaves. And that's a really interesting touch. Disney does a lot of interesting things.
Yeah.
They do. They really do.
It blows my mind how far they go. Like you said, it just simply blows my mind how far they go to maintain that certain level of you could even say authenticity within their brand, within their parks, within whatever it is. And part of that, as they've defined, part of that is, never turn the lights off on the castle, this or that, just because they don't want to break or even when you want to go even deeper into the conversation in terms of the infamous tunnels underneath the park. They built that entire structure that way. So that way, they're not having conflicts and interpersonal conflicts, between so they aren't confusing children.
Yeah, it was actually really neat because
me.
My grandmother works for Disney. So growing up, I got to see a lot of that stuff with her, going to different places within the, like, behind the parks and stuff, and seeing things that like most tourists wouldn't be able to see. So I already had an idea of that, but yeah, it was just really neat, especially when it comes to something like the castle. You just don't think of like, oh, I never really thought one way or the other, but now I know that they don't turn the light off. And the fact that I found this so interesting too, is that they wash the buildings every single night from top to bottom. Yeah. And it was funny because I remember standing there on the street. We were standing there on the street one time, and they were washing down everything. So all the water is running off the sidewalks and the streets and everything. And they were trying to shoot this one scene right there on the sidewalk. And I know exactly what happened. And so like, I don't want to say something and make them look bad, but I remember standing there, and at one point, there was this bit of a conflict, I think, between the people washing the buildings and the streets and the people that were trying to shoot. And they were like, no, I'm supposed to be washing this. And they're like, yeah, but we need to shoot this. And so they're like, yeah, but I need to wash like this section right here. And it was funny. And I remember thinking like, why is this happening? Like, yeah.
So neither side wanted to give. They wanted to wash. Y'all wanted to film.
Yeah, and it may have been the fact that it was like 4:00 in the morning playing into like my perception of this, but because I really don't remember what happened after that. I do remember shooting that scene, but I remember that specifically being that like they were trying to wash it and they were trying to film, and yeah.
Each side was just so committed to their job that
they don't give in. But I guess
they took that stuff seriously.
I think we ended up holding off because I remember we had to wait for a little while at this area. We were all just sitting there, and they're like, "Yeah, we can't move from here because they're washing, and we have to let them finish."
You know what it was? Those guys washing probably just wanted to go home. They're probably like, I just want to be done with my job and go home.
Probably.
I'm not.
Probably. And then after that, because they had been washing everything, when we finally did get to shoot that film, I was one of the people walking right behind the main actors in the commercial with a balloon in my hand. And I had to walk. They were standing like up the sidewalk and near the building. And I was standing behind them on the sidewalk behind them. And then there was like a road in between. And so they weren't getting wet. But I had to walk off of the sidewalk down into the road and then back up to the sidewalk on the other side. So I was like going diagonally behind them. And whenever I had to step, there was a big puddle right in my way from all of the water from the washing the buildings. And I had to walk through that thing like 50 times. And my sandals got soaking wet and they were wet. That was the first scene we shot. So they were wet for the next like 10 hours.
Well, we're running out of time for this week. Thank you, Emily, so much for coming on again today.
My pleasure.
It was so fun to get to talk to you a little bit more about your creative process and your studio work. I hope we can hear some of that soon. That's it for this week here on Chase the Unknown. Make sure you join us again next Wednesday. We'll have an all new episode for you. Until then, chase your unknown.